Alas, poor Pincushion. I knew him, Internet.
Hi folks, welcome back to my channel. A few weeks ago, I was bored and I was looking around my sewing room at all of the pretty things I'd done and thought, I'm not really thrilled with this guy. My pincushion. It's the tomato pincushion. Pretty much everybody who sews has one. You may even not sew and have one stuck in a drawer somewhere, and they're all right, but they're not really me. And then I looked and I said, I have this guy. He's magnetic. He's kind of fun. You can use him to pick up pins off the floor. You can just throw pins at it and it'll stick, and it's fast and easy, but you can see it's not very pretty. And I even tried making it pretty with washi tape, but it really didn't work very well. So I thought, I like my wrist pincushion, but it's really not me. I made it off of a tutorial that I got from Evelyn Wood, who is awesome. You should check her out. But it just lacked a little something. So I came up with this. Lady Disdain's wrist corsage pincushion. It's fun, it's pretty, it's girly, it's me. And I'm going to show you how to make it with just a few materials. There's a tutorial to follow, and it includes instructions both for cutting by hand and by making with a Cricut. I personally use the Cricut maker, and it only takes 2 mats, which is pretty awesome. And the information to access the file that I have put on Cricut Design Space will be below, as well as instructions and a materials list for the entire project. Enjoy the tutorial. Tools and materials. The first thing you're going to need is 2 pieces of felt. One for the petals and one for the leaves. Now, of course, I'm using green for the leaves, but if you want some fantasy leaves, you can do that too. Or if you don't want leaves at all, you don't actually need this, we can come up with another way to make the base. But if you at least have a piece of felt for your flowers, piece of felt for your leaves, that's the best. These are 9x12 sheets. I actually have made a Cricut Maker file, and it will be able to be reached by you, and I will put the information in below. But I have actually very efficiently used almost all of the petal sheet and only the top section of the green sheet. So if you have a slightly smaller green piece, you will probably be able to make some green leaves out of it. Once you have those, the other things you will need are needle and thread, or optionally, a glue gun. We also need a pencil and paper if you are using the optional no Cricut hand cutting method. You will need scissors, optionally pinking shears. And if you are doing the handmade method without the Cricut, you will need either a compass or various circular things. This is the tube from a roll of duct tape, various sizes spools of thread. If you have cookie cutters that are flower shaped, you can even use those. But this is going to get us started with making our pattern for the petals. I've actually used these Simplicity pattern weights. You're also going to need some elastic. These are 1/4 inch elastic, but you could use 1/2 inch if you like. Or I have some fold over elastic that can be used as well. You will also need, if you want to do an actual metal bracelet, you will need some sort of cuff style bracelet. This one was, I think, $7 on Amazon, and it actually bends pretty nicely so that you can get it around your arm and squeeze it fairly tightly. So you will need that. Cutting on the Cricut. If you are using a Cricut machine, click the link in the description below and open the project in Cricut Design Space. Once you've opened the file, you'll set up your Cricut machine with 2 mats for your felt. And either the fine point blade or the rotary cutting blade if you have a Cricut maker. And then go ahead and make your cuts. When you have finished cutting out the Cricut file, which is just 2 mats and very, very simple, you will end up with 2 green circles, 2 leaves, and 6 sets of petals. 2 that are 4.5 inches roughly in size, 2 that are 4 inches roughly in size, and 2 that are 2.5 inches in size. This was a super, super simple process. I can't tell you exactly how quick it was. I love my Cricut maker. It makes very precise cuts. No, they are not sponsoring me, but I really do like my Cricut maker, and I like to use technology in my work whenever I can. Cutting by hand. This is the version, the set that you will make with the Cricut maker. You can also make this by hand, and we're going to go into doing that now before we start assembling. The reason I asked you to assemble some circular items is because we are going to trace them onto paper. I found that this duct tape roll gave me a pretty decent circle. We need to save about a little bit of room though, because we need to make some petals. So this will end up being the base of your largest flower. So then what we're going to do, once we've done that, the easiest way to make this flower is to take something like a thread spool, and you're just going to trace another circle sort of halfway through the larger circle. We're going to do that until we get all the way around. Now, if these are not lined up perfectly, it's totally okay. I mean, we're making something that's organic anyways, so the petals are not going to be totally even. So that's roughly what we're doing, and you can even it out, space it out a little bit better, but I'm just going to use this one the way it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my paper scissors. These are my Cricut scissors. They say fabric on them, but I actually prefer them for paper. And I'm just going to cut around the outside edge. The inside lines don't mean anything to us. All we want to do is cut around the outside of the circle. So there's going to be my first template. For the second one, here's where you could use a compass. And you're just going to draw your circle. And then you're going to use something smaller. I have another small thread spool over here. And I'm going to do the same thing I did with the previous one. You just want to end up with a couple of different sizes of circles. 3 actually, 3 different sizes. As again, I said that the ones that I made on the Cricut were 4.5 inches across, and then I jumped down to 2.5. But you can play around with your sizing. I'm thinking even a very small, tight pincushion would be fun too. So there's another one. So we're going to do this. We're going to end up with 3 different sizes. You do still need the 2 circles and the 2 leaves that come from the green sheet of felt or whatever felt you're using. So you might want to trace something else to make yourself a flower base or use your compass. So you need 2 of these circles. And then you're going to need 2 leaves. Now for leaves, you could trace them out. I personally preferred to make mine with pinking shears when I cut them by hand. So all I did was sort of cut a long oval with points. I've got some scrap here that I can work with. Now I'm going to take my pinking shears. Now you could do this with regular scissors, but pinking shears gives it a really neat edge. And I'm just kind of cutting an oval shape with my pinking shears. And I made 2 of those. Lastly, trace and cut 2 of each shape out of your felt. Making the base. Once you've done that, and you end up with the same items that I showed you earlier, your 2 leaves, your circles, and your 6 petals. What we're going to do first is we're going to take our 2 green circles, and those are going to get stacked one on top of the other. And then we're going to hand stitch them closed. Your hand stitching for this, I know a lot of people go, ugh, hand stitching, I really don't want to do it. But your hand stitching for this does not need to be perfect because everything is really going to be covered by the flower. This is not an incredibly large circle. I am just going to start stitching, and I'm just going really next to the edge, just sort of, I guess it's whip stitching all the way around the outside. Just a very simple stitch. Now, if you do this with the same color thread as your circle, you don't have to turn it inside out. So I'm just going to keep stitching until I get to approximately 2 inches, like a little 2-inch mouth left open, like a little Muppet mouth. We're going to stop stitching and turn it inside out. My thread's getting short, so I think I'm just going to bind it off here, tie it off in whatever method works for you. I usually like to make the loop and push my needle through it to create a knot, and I do that a couple of times. Okay, so I'm going to pick up my pretty scissors and cut this off. So you can see my green stitching and that I've left this little sort of envelope style opening. And we've got this little pocket. And what I'm going to do, and I'm sorry if you've already put these in your wastebasket, but so we're actually going to use as much of our felt as we possibly can. And what I did was I just kind of cut the pieces a little bit smaller and just stuff them into the mouth of my circles. Look, it's got a little inside of its mouth there. And you just figure out how much fullness you want in there. Mine is not all that thick. You can see it's maybe 3/4 of an inch to an inch thick. And I'm just going to get those tucked in there. And then I am going to seam this closed.
Adding the leaves.
Okay, so as you can see, I've completed my circle. All it does is really provide a base to protect your hand or your wrist when you're pushing pins back into your pincushion. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to attach the leaves to the pincushion, the 2 leaves. So for this one, I am going to use the leaves that I made with the Cricut. And you can decide if you do want the 2 of them next to each other. Do you want them across from each other like this? Do you want them not at all? That kind of looks like a snitch. If you don't want them at all, you don't have to use them. But one thing that often helps with determining how these are going to go is to take the largest petal and kind of lay it on top and go, okay, how do I want my leaves to look? Do I want them like that? Do I want them sort of overlapping on one side? I kind of like that today, so I think that's what I am going to do. So I'm going to lay my 2 leaves with the points in the center. The reason I said that you can use a glue gun is you could also put this down with hot glue. But if you're working on this with kids, I guess it's determining whether you want them to have a needle or you want them to have a hot glue gun. Generally, I think a needle is probably preferable, but... So I'm just going to get under my leaves, hide my knot under my leaves, and just sort of stitch quickly both of these leaves down to the base. Just a few good stitches. They can kind of crinkle up if you want them to. Doesn't really matter because the big flower is going to go right on top of them. And again, knotting off my thread. Just as long as they're secure, you can stop. You're just going to use your own judgment. I can actually not cut my thread, save myself a little time. I'm going to take this needle and I'm going to shove it right through the circle to the other side and flip it over. So right through the center of the circle, or roughly the center. Now we have leaves on the top and our thread is coming out the bottom.
Adding elastic.
The next thing we are going to do is we're going to add on our elastic. Now, with the elastic, you want to think about a couple of things. I'm going to take my bracelet here. The elastic needs to wrap around the bracelet and be really, really snug. So it's going to sit right through the middle like that, and it wants to be nice and snug because it's going to hold your pincushion on there. The reason I use elastic is because I have made the idea of this as being a customizable thing. This is the bracelet that I use for my pincushion. I took my pincushion off so that I could show you how to make this. Make sure that's nice and tight. Get the length that you want. Cut it to the right length so that it overlaps a little bit and you're going to be able to stitch it down. And then we're going to sew that down to our cushion. Now, when you're thinking about this, you want to think about which way your leaves are going to face with the elastic on the bracelet. If I want my leaves to come out the top like this, then I have to position my elastic so that when the flower goes on the cushion, it will be sitting on my arm the way I want those leaves to sit. I want my leaves to sit sort of this way. So when I sew my elastic down to my circle, I'm going to do it with one end of the elastic facing the leaves and one end of the elastic facing the opposite side. So now I'm going to stitch my elastic down. Stitching down one side. And again, you could do this with hot glue. You could even skip the elastic altogether and hot glue to your bracelet if that is what makes sense for you. I'm doing it with all hand stitching so that I can show you that it is actually fairly easy to do, even though many people think of hand stitching as dreadful. So you can see I've sort of made a ring loop and I'm holding that end down with my thumb and I'm going to stitch it down. We're basically just overlapping the ends and just stitching those ends down to the circle. You can dig right in there, right into your felt stuffing. Just don't go through the other side and stab yourself in the hand. This original bracelet idea, the idea of using your own bracelet to make a pincushion, came from Evelyn Wood. And then I sort of ran with it and elaborated on it. So if you like a plain pincushion, I would definitely suggest checking out Evelyn Wood. She has a tutorial for that. So now we have our elastic attached to our base and our leaves. We just sort of slip the elastic through the bracelet. So this in itself is a pincushion, but it's a rather feeble looking pincushion. We want to make it look nice and elegant and feminine and like something that we want.
Building the flower.
So we have our 4.5-inch petals, our 4-inch, and our 2.5-inch. The first 4-inch petal goes down flat on top of our pincushion. Just completely flat. We want it to cover up all of our weird stitching and things that we did. We want it to cover up the base of the leaves. And it's going to give us some nice wrist corsage size when we put it on our arm. So now I'm going to take my needle and thread again. All I'm going to do is get my fingers roughly in the center here, and I'm going to scoop up the petal and part of the base. Again, not going all the way through, just getting myself into the base. And I'm going to pull through a few times. If it pulls a little bit so that it's not flat, it's fine. We're creating something that is reasonably organic. So I'm allowing mine to have a little bit of a dip in there. It's just going to add dimension to the flower. And I'm tying off. Not that you really have to, because we're going to go right to the next petal. I'm going to lay my thread and needle down for a second, and I'm going to get my second of the larger petals. And what I'm going to do with that first is I'm going to pinch it so that I have a fold that sticks up in the middle. I'm going to get that gripped in my hand. It looks sort of like lips or something. And I'm going to grab my needle and thread, so I have it in my hand, and I'm going to lay my pinched flower right on top there. I'm going to drive the needle through, careful of your fingers. So I've now got that second petal on my thread and secured in. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my grabbing again. So I'm just going to try and grab the base petal and the folds of my second petal and just kind of pull. And you can see I'm getting that little bit of a tuck in there. It's totally fine. It's giving us more height, and it's going to give us more places for our pins to grab when we're done. So now we are moving on to our set of 4-inch petals. And the thing to keep remembering with these is that we're going to make our little pinch again. But when we're putting these on, we want to make sure that we are crisscrossing them. So you can see on this one where I'm holding it right now, my pinch fold is running this way. I'm going to run this fold this way. And again, I'm just going to pick up my needle, stab it through the center, kind of go up the side and through. Now that next petal is part of my stack, and I'm just going to start grabbing the next layer. And this is the point where if you're comfortable, you can start, maybe adding another little tuck. So what if I want to put a little fold here so that this piece kind of sticks up a little bit? I think I'm going to do that and just kind of stitch it down. You can just go with the single fold method, just that pinch. You don't have to get crazy. But if you want to, you can start adding some little tucks. So you can see how I'm adding dimension by just sort of pulling extra bits of the petal into place. All right, so I've stitched that one in. I'm going to grab my next one, make my little fold, lay it in a crosswise fashion to the last one. And now that we're building dimension, we can actually start kind of turning them before we stitch them down and kind of get them into the place that we want. If you didn't give yourself enough thread, like I did not because I still have 2 petals left to go, you can actually just tie it off and go and rethread your needle. And now I'm down to my 2.5-inch petals. With these, there's 2 options. You can keep going the way we've been going. Make your little pinch and put it down. I've started doing this with them. I fold them both in half and I kind of overlap them, entwine them in each other, sort of making a more pronounced centerpiece. So that's another way that you can do it. But I'm going to just continue with the method that we were using. It gets a little tougher to get them through there as it gets more full, and keep in mind that you're not having to go all the way down to the bottom circle now. You're just grabbing into the next layer because it's just all kind of interconnected. The way I like to tie off is I like to take my needle and go back down through a few of the layers so that I can hide my stitches underneath. So I can hide my tie off. So I'm just going to, see, I'm underneath these first few petals and I'm just tying off in here. And if it looks like it's a little floppy to you, if you don't like where it is, you can start adding a few more stitches in, just kind of holding areas down if you want them that way. It's all you. You're just basically sculpting with the felt and the thread. But this is essentially a finished pincushion. So what I'm going to do right now is I am going to show you that we have a finished pincushion. So I'm going to clip off my threads. Here's my bracelet. Going to thread it through my elastic. And voila. One finished pincushion.
Making it yours.
There are a few other things that you can do if you want to change it up a little bit. If you don't want circular petals, you can add points. If you want to make that sort of rose center like I made, you can do that. Another thing that you can do, which I did not include in the file, is you can make sort of a stamen center. All I did was I took a circle and I cut into it and left the center hole, but I cut sort of, I don't know, maybe is at about 1/2 inch. I just cut with the tip of my scissors in all the way around, and it didn't even have to be even. This is not even. And then you take it and you pinch it, and it gives you a 3-dimensional center. So you could add something like that in black or yellow or white, whatever you want. This is a little fantasy project. So anyway, that is one of the other things you could do. You could sew a beautiful button into the middle. You could put these on your sewing machine and stitch a decorative stitch around the outside of the petals. You can also, on your leaves, you could actually draw very subtle leaf lines in your petal. And again, back to that idea of the pinking shears. If you wanted to do pinking shear leaves, you can get something more like that looks like it came off of a rose or something. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. Let me show you a couple of the different pincushions that I've made. This was my initial version. It goes with my sewing room. My sewing room is pink and white, so I like that one. This one is same as the one that we just made, but with lighter leaves. And then I made this one, which is multi-toned. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. One thing I will say is that when you put this on your bracelet, if it doesn't feel tight enough to you, you can grab a regular elastic and sort of wrap it around the ends and hide it underneath the flower, and it will hold everything in even tighter. And Olivia and I wanted to show you one more benefit of the pincushion and the fact that you use elastic. You can put it on your dog's collar and they will enjoy being pretty. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and you enjoyed making your pincushion, please show me what you made. Tag me on Instagram. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when I upload new videos. Thanks. I'll see you again soon.